The topic for today is the value metrics for the Chief Digital Officer. The reason why I put this one up over there is like, every time I go and talk to a specific customer, they tell me that how do I measure the value for digital initiative? And we have a specific process at Hortonworks which we take to every customer. However, a lot of them say that it's not applicable this way or that way. So we said, probably let's try and aim to create some standard KPIs which we can apply in most of the common industries. So how many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you are from retail over here? Financial services? Wow. Insurance? Manufacturing? Anyone else which I missed? Telco? So it's a fair representation. Of course, FS being the bigger ones, that's how we see in the big data market as well. So what I'm going to cover today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the fourth industrial revolution. And I just saw the timer now. I'm going to talk about the value metrics which we have. A little bit about how business models are getting disruptive. Then I go and talk about KPIs. One important aspect which I will touch about is the organizational bit. So what is the impact on staff morale with the fact that new business models are being set up? And if I have time, if you allow me, I'll tell you some examples towards the end. So let's start with a few numbers. So I'll put up all of them on the screen. The three of the most important numbers which come to my mind. Number one, on the right-hand side, only 36% of the CEOs, probably a third of the CEOs, have a digital vision and they've communicated it, even though mostly 90% or probably more than 90% of the employees believe that they should have a digital initiative, which means what? The so what on that one is there's a big disconnect between C-suite and the normal employees when it comes towards digital or big data or something like that. The second one is a lot of the companies, of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies are seeing their business models getting disrupted. I talked about it last time when I was here. I went to a telco customer. They said that we want to become an IT services company. It's a $10 billion plus company. I spoke to another telco company. They said that we want to become a cybersecurity solution company. There's a financial services company who said that we want to become a fintech so that we can compete with the payments providers. So the business models are getting disrupted. The core business focus, and a lot of companies worry that their value stream will have to change going over the time. And the third one, of course, is the ones which I've marked in red, is none of them have a soundproof or a robust data strategy going forward. And that's one of the key things which I'm going to talk about later today. So another metrics from Gartner, the lady before me mentioned Gartner as well. So Gartner did a survey and they said, let's try and understand what is the problem which most organizations have when you're talking about big data. So number one, as you see on the screen, is measuring the value. McKinsey Global Initiative, they also did another survey, which is on the cloud over there. Only 15% of the firms claim to have a way wherein they can measure the value for digital initiative or digital engagement. So again, coming back to the whole point, that's where we started. Every time we go to a customer, we realize that that is where the problem is. So this is a sort of a very small path which we take or we advocate whenever we go to a specific customer. So it's a four-step journey. It's very simple and it's linked to our maturity scorecard. So last time when I was here in November, I spoke about the big data maturity scorecard. For those of you who are new, Hortonworks have a big data maturity assessment which helps you assess your big data readiness on a host of factors, starting from analytics to capability, organizational sponsorship, executive sponsorship, and a host of other things. It's catered per industry. What it gives you is two things. Number one, where is it that you're today and where is it that you will be in 2 years' time from a big data readiness point of view. Number two, you overlay it with the industry-specific point of view, which says, where is it that the industry will be in 2 years from now. So that gives you an idea of where your place in terms of your aspirations and current estimates. So based on that, so we have 4 stages, and when we go and talk to organizations, a lot of the C-suite or lines of businesses, heads of lines of businesses, they ask me the question, how long is it going to take me to become a disruptive organization? And the answer is depends. And it depends upon where is it that you're today. So if you're at the aware stage where you've just done a few POCs, proof of concepts, or you've done a few science projects, it doesn't really, it's a bit too ambitious if you said that you wanted to become disruptive in 6 months. And or if you were in optimizing phase where all the use cases you had were affecting the bottom line. So complexity reduction, cost takeout, anything which affects the bottom line, it's going to again take you a long time to get to the futuristic or the transforming stage, what we call, which is essentially combining different data sources to change your business model. Example would be a retailer uses weather data to combine their supply chain integration. There's another a bank who combine various different sources on their trading desk, and they don't just do it for FRTB use cases, but they actually assess it to understand what is the risk profile of every position which every trader takes instantaneously based on every Twitter feed, every social media news, what's out there. So it depends, and the answer is it takes time. So I'm going to quickly run through it. So for every industry, we have something called as a use case maturity roadmap, which is based on the maturity stages which I just showed, the list of most commonly used use cases and where is it that you are, which business function. So that's where the conversation starts. That's how it looks like, essentially. On the right-hand side, you see the most commonly used use cases. We have it for every industry. You'll start the conversation. You'll attack a specific part of the business, and you'll go forward. But what happens after that? You go into the business modeling phase, and you say, okay, fine, let's identify the use cases, and let's identify the size of the pie, which is where you start actually calculating what is the ROI or the potential ROI for a specific use case. And you do the standard metrics as NPV, ROI, 3-month cost of delay, because that's a big metric which a lot of customers don't understand. So what is the cost if I sit on my decision today and if I do nothing? So the cost of doing nothing today versus going forward from 3 months' time. So you do that, and then you combine that with the technology. Because we are not a management consulting firm, even though I'm trained as a management consultant, we work with the technology teams, and then we say, can we deliver it? So we create something called as a prioritization matrix. I know a lot of organizations have different nomenclatures and semantics for that. But the whole idea is, on the x-axis, you've got the business value. On the y-axis, you've got, can you deliver it? And based on that, you have a matrix out of which you take out and draw a plan. So that's the standard method which you use with large organizations, complex organizations who have legacy systems and where disruption is not easy. I'm going to touch about a little bit on organizational structures. Center of excellence, specifically for big data, not so much for digital. We have various models over there. We do talk about various organizational constructs. The one which we advocate is the one over here, which is hybrid. That's where you see the likes of GE, Philips, Procter & Gamble, and all of them employ. Long story short, the answer is the chief data officer or the chief digital officer reports directly to the board. They have the autonomy to go after the disruptive innovation, so they don't have to focus about the quarterly investments and or the earnings per share, which the analysts care about. But at the same time, they have a dotted line to the CIO. Why? Because they need to have the gatekeeper organization with them to make it commercially sustainable. So that's the sustainable model. I'm happy to share any documents after this in detail about it. So the next phase is, I'm going to run a video because we've talked about the legacy systems. We've talked about how you approach a digital enterprise in a large organization. But because the world is changing today and because business models are changing, I thought I'll just show a video. There's volume in here, right? There's no volume.
Capacity of conventional digital storage devices. So researchers are turning to natural genetic code to contain a growing deluge of data. In a recent experiment, researchers at Columbia University...
Sorry, the volume's not working.
...were able to store a movie, a computer operating system, and a $50 Amazon gift card on a single drop of DNA. The process relies on DNA's natural ability to rapidly reorganize itself and recombine in complex but predictable patterns. That allows it to be used just like computer code to store and retrieve information. To correct any errors in reconstructing the information stored in the DNA, scientists used an algorithm originally designed for streaming video on a cell phone. The process cost about $3,500 per megabyte of storage. first computer magnetic disk drive, introduced by the IBM Corporation in 1956. But that memory device was so big it had to be carried on a forklift. It could only store a total of 3.5 megabytes of data. A single gram of DNA could hold about 730 billion megabytes of data. In theory, a DNA storage system could reduce the entire Library of Congress to a collection of molecules.
So that's the reason why I play that story is we're in the big data business. A lot of these companies, Oracle, Teradata, you guys are here over there, and you name it, they're all into the data business. But Microsoft have actually invested $500 million in a startup based out of the Valley, of course, who are actually not only discussing it as a prototype, but actually way ahead in terms of implementation where they say they can use the human DNA as a storage. And if it's just going to cost 3,500 per megabyte, the whole business model will change. And imagine what it'll do when you have the IoT model coming in. Imagine what it'll do when you have people walking in as sources. So there was a tweet which went out by Elon Musk, and he jokingly said, which is, so machines get corrupted. You have cyber attacks. If humans start communicating with each other and become data sources, then will we see Walking Dead? But then those are real scenarios which we have to figure about. But this is what I meant about disruption. The standard business models do not exist. And the World Economic Forum says that by 2020, 73% of the non-specific jobs, as they call it, will be written away because of AI. And if this gets implemented by 2030, almost 100% of the existing jobs in at least 17 different sectors will have to be remodeled on different fashions. So how do you actually go about and measure the metric? Because a lot of these organizations you'll see, everyone's into this race to set up a digital venture or a VC venture, a venture arm where they go out and say, let's just invest. You have Unilever Ventures, you have Barclays, everyone going towards the fact. So how do you measure the success on those initiatives? Because you pump in hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it is not the same as a large organization. So beyond the financial metrics, you have to discuss about a few things. One, of course, is the early customer indications which you're getting. What are your customers doing? Are they buying from you or they're buying across your competitor as well? Do they have a propensity to stick with you or do they want to go out after a certain rate? You focus on the engagement of customers where you talk about the standard NPS and the churn rate, but at the same time, you also talk about cohort analysis. So cohort analysis is a very common term for those of you who are familiar with venture capital. But a lot of the larger organizations are starting to do that as well. And it's not only Google, as you see, we would associate ourselves to Google to be one of the most innovative companies, but even companies like UPS or Coca-Cola, they have started to include that. The daily usage, of course, tells you how sticky your customers are, and then the user growth. So the whole idea behind these metrics is that you can focus on a specific digital enterprise, and you can focus and invest on the futuristic innovations without having to worry that my analysts on Wall Street will question me about earnings per share or my quarterly targets or my quarterly revenues. That allows a lot of these organizations to have the long-term vision and go after these projects without having to worry about the financial basics because the street is going to punish them if they don't meet the target. And that's the new norm which is starting to come through. So next up, as I said, is what's going to happen because of the new models coming up in terms of staff morale and engagement. So if you think of it, today, you and I, when we work in an organization, our managers give us an MBO, they give us a KPI, we have appraisal targets. At the end of the year, biannually, whatever, we are measured against that. But when you're running in a hyper-growth startup, where the milestones change almost quarterly, forget half-yearly, you've got to do a lot of things where you have to change the way you're engaging with your employees, the way you're engaging with your organizations. So a few examples over there is like the tools. For example, Zalando is a startup which many of you might have heard in the UK. They use an app. What it does it takes feedback on a real-time basis from every meeting, 360 feedback, from every time I present, every time I chat, and it features in all of that, and they have a model which learning model which updates itself based on how you're performing or how your feedback is coming through. What it allows them to do is it allows them to measure employees not against static objectives, but their whole persona of how they're performing. The second thing is you have to de-link the compensation with performance. There has been enough research done that we need to get away beyond the bell curve. We need to get away the standard mechanism, because the thing which I'm quoting over there, the study from Dan, who's a Nobel laureate, is he says there's more downside than there is upside to give people extra bonuses linked to the performance. Because on an average, you'll only have anything between 8% to 12% of your employees overperforming. But at the same time, because of the fact that the bonuses or the extra compensation which those small amount of employees will have compared to the other large organizations, the morale will go down. So you need to get away from that. The other bit is, of course, is better coaching and democratization of the process. So currently, again, we're coming back to how you measure employees who are into this business of creating digital initiatives, is there's a big understanding of doing it bureaucratically or mechanically. But when you were to look at a specific digital engagement, the success or the results do not come necessarily immediately, or they're not necessarily of what you would expect. So how do you solve that? So one of the ways to solve is that you take away the manager system. But then the question is, how do you initiate control? So a lot of organizations, what they've started to do, and one good example is a big retailer in the US, Macy's. What they've started to do is they have an app which allows every employee to put in their objectives, the KPIs, but it also allows them to be validated by the larger organization. So it's not a top-down system. It's validated by their colleagues, by the people who are actually running it, and it allows them to work with that system, and it gives them that freedom to go after the futuristic, long-term, visionary kind of things. So how many minutes do I have? So 1 minute. So I want to talk about a few of the stories which I have seen. So the reason why I call them as a digerati stories is the word from the literati, so the elitist digital people. So one of the examples I will give is, I was at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona a few weeks back, and I was walking to the stall, and Ford Motors were there, legendary automaker, and they were displaying connected cities. And I went up to the desk and asked them the question that, why are you guys displaying connected cities? And they said that we know that we are way behind in competing with connected cars. That is something we have to do any which ways. So we are taking the leap on the next thing, which is connected cities. Similarly, there's a telco company in the UK. They didn't bid when 4G spectrum was done, because they said we are way behind and we're never going to get enough spectrum to launch these services. So what is the future? The future, when IoT comes in, there are use cases which the government is doing, the Department of Defense is doing, which will allow them to have a better understanding of the employee profile. But that will never be possible without 5G. So they've invested and they've made a case that we will be going after 5G. So the reason or the rationale, what I'm trying to say over here is, from an overarching strategy point of view, a lot of these organizations, large ones, smaller ones, they are starting to think really long-term, and they're not afraid of giving up their short-term objectives, if that might take, to win in the long term. So, yeah, I'm over here. Any questions, more than happy to answer. Thank you.